What's going on?
Hey, man.
You gonna remember my name this time?
Probably.
Good. Hey, everybody. It's Doug.
Oh, I thought it was Tony.
Oh, thanks.
And it's Dominic.
And Tony, I guess. It was funny. We were just watching episode 1, which we recorded minutes ago, and we realized that we had no idea what we were doing from the start, which we just talked about really resembles agency life quite a bit.
Yeah, I think it was funny because I literally started recording the first episode and then turned to him and went, what are we calling this thing? Which was partly just me forgetting, but was, really kind of also indicative of a little bit of what agency life is about. And it's both a wonderful thing, but also something that I think as agency owners, we have to be cognizant of and address sometimes, is that I think the nature of who we are as agency people, oftentimes, sort of some half data nerd, half artist kind of thing that goes on there, is that we can go into starting an agency with not a lot of plan and not a lot of thought. There's power to that. Like, we also are the type of people who just kind of go and do things and make stuff happen, which is great.
Yep. But
to walk into a podcast and literally not know the name of a podcast, there's probably a downside to that as well. We'll figure it out at some point what that is. But it does speak to the idea of, like, do you really plan some things out? Are you making sure that the what you're embarking on, like, actually makes sense? Is it in your wheelhouse of things? If you're a copywriter by trade, are you sure you want to take on a Facebook ads client? Is your knee-jerk reaction to say yes, when maybe you need to pump the brakes just ever so slightly and go, like, am I going to be able to deliver on this? Or I guess you could consider having a partner and bringing somebody in, like an outside referral source for Facebook ads, something like that. But just putting some thought into things. And again, like I said, all joking aside, there is some power to, like, we just decided let's start this podcast and make it happen. And that's a good trait to have as well, just making things happen. But spending a little time preparing is good as well.
The one thing I will say, and the caveat I will give, is most people won't take action. So as funny as it was, like, that we didn't really know the name or anything, there's a lot of power to just jumping in and kind of realizing, like, I have to do something. Because I think there's so many people, especially at the early stage, like that getting started stage, that they have this fear that either they're not good enough or that, like, well, what does that mean for my job? What if my employer finds out? Like, all these little things that prevent them from even starting. And I think, like, that moment, just be like, listen, just do it, has a lot of power. But very quickly, to your point, you're going to have to start to assemble some structure and realize what it is that you deliver. But I think in that really, really early stage, people just need to do it. They need to get out there. They need to go get their first client. And I know we're going to dive into some of the strategies, but the biggest thing I see that limits people is they're almost too detailed in their strategy. And it gets to be this big thing. We were talking about that yesterday. It was like there's too much information, so people just do nothing.
Right.
They just sit there. They get stuck in status quo instead of, like, if you want to start, know what your thing is, go ask somebody for money. When you have your first client, you've started a business, then you can grow from there.
For sure. Yeah, there's actually a term for that. We did a blog article, like, I don't know, maybe last year, and then I shot a series of my mashup videos on the idea of infobesity, which is actually a real term. I thought awesome. My writer made that up. Turned out she didn't. It really was a term. But the idea of infobesity, now obviously not trying to make light of obesity as a disease, as a problem, but the idea that we all know what obesity is, right? Like the incapability of like controlling your intake of food, for instance. And infobesity follows the same lines. It's the ability to take in too much information and not act is really what happens. And in our world today, like, look, the amount of podcasts, anyway, the amount of YouTube videos, all the stuff that's out there that we could be looking at for information, but it does require you to act. And so I think, again, it's a positive just to kind of get launched. I mean, we've been talking about doing a podcast for a couple of days, and then we were like, well, shoot, let's just set up the microphone and go. Yeah. So there's a power to that, probably lacking in a little planning, as you can tell. But so first client thing, we could leave them with a tip on first client. What do you think? Getting your first client?
Yeah.
I got an idea around that.
But real quick, is the call to action, which everything in marketing should have a call to action.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to have tips like this in a private Facebook group. Just comment wherever you're seeing this, just comment below, and we'll send you a DM with details on how to join that group. But yeah, fire away.
Yeah. Free private group. Just,
free private group.
We like calls to action with free around them. That's
free
always
private
good
group.
Too. So for a first client thing, here's a tip that I like to tell people is that when you structure your offering, so this does require some planning, when you structure a rough idea around an offering that you think that you can go do, so you're I don't want to stick with the copywriter. I'll just stick with the copywriter example. You're a copywriter, and maybe you want to do some freelance copywriting, or maybe you want to do some copywriting with a little bit of a course attached to it, like you want to teach people how to do that, is pick a couple of people inside of your network. Look through your LinkedIn, which, by the way, you should be on LinkedIn. But pick your LinkedIn, somebody on your LinkedIn network who you're pretty close with, a friend of yours, a business of yours that would actually make like an ideal client. So this will help you with your offering, is picturing that person ahead of time and saying like, I could help Dave, right? And what does Dave look like in your mind? And Dave's your friend, and you're like, well, if I could go into his business, I would help. My suggestion to you then is to actually call Dave. Especially if Dave's a good friend of yours, right? That's what really works best is if there's somebody in your network that you've had some sort of good relationship with. They don't have to be a friend, but like a business associate. And you call Dave and you say, hey, I'd like to take you to lunch and I want to run something by you. And I'd be very honest about what it was. I would say, listen, I'm starting this new business. I'm thinking about going out on my own, for instance. And I have an idea of something that I would like to offer, and actually you'd be a really good candidate for you. Now, I'm not pitching you on it, because this is the key. You can't be pitching them on it, but say, I'd love your feedback on what it is that I'm doing. I would love your thoughts around it, and if you can refine the offer a little bit, or like tell me like some guidelines around like what it should cost, I would just love to have your feedback. Can I take you to lunch? I've done this every single time I've either launched a new product line or my company in general. Have talked to a couple of people and said, can I take you to lunch? Because I want to just show you. Now I'm coming from it from a genuine place that I really do want to show them, and I really want them to give me the feedback. The feedback has always been awesome. And I'll tell you the other part of it, every one of them has asked to be a client. So the conversation ends up going like, hey, this is what I think I'm going to do. This is a little bit what it looks like. Do you have any thoughts around it? They always do, like, probably a little less of this, more of that. Actually, that could be helpful. And every one of them, without me asking, has said, so how much to hire you? And now you're going to give that one away, not give it away. You're going to give that one for a lot less money than you could. I remember my very first time doing this when I first started up my business. I'm going to give you some context on where we're at today. It's a minimum $100,000 engagement. I quoted my very first client, who I did exactly like that because I actually wasn't prepared for the price question. I quoted him at $1,500 a month. That's a far cry from what I'm charging nowadays. But you know what? It was worth it. And it proved out that I could do it, even if it wasn't enough money to like quit my job. I mean, I had already quit my job, but you know what I mean? So, but it was $1,500 and it proved I could do it. And you know what? The feedback I got from him was invaluable. And 3 months later, we renegotiated and I billed him for a lot more than that in the following year. So just a tip on getting your first client, look to your network. This isn't like multi-level marketing, but look at your network, go to them with the honest thought, like you really want some feedback, but chances are it's going to help you turn it into a client.
I started at $375 a month.
$375 a month.
Doesn't pay for much.
Doesn't pay for
10 years ago though. I was like, holy.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm rolling in it.
Thing, like you got to start somewhere, right? And you got to prove that it works. And my next one was like a couple of weeks later, same thing, lunch, and that was I think I went all the way up to $1,800 because I was scared to ask. I didn't know what to ask for. Yeah. But you know, pretty soon it was enough to then sustain us as a family and then build from there.
So I learned a great tip from two people, Keith Ferrazzi and Jeff Hoffman. So if you're struggling to figure out what it is you want to do, text 10 people, like the closest people to you might be former bosses, colleagues, mentors. Text 10 people, what is the one thing you think I'm great at that somebody would value? And it's really important to put the word value in there because you are going to have to monetize it. And you will be shocked. I can promise this. You are going to be surprised by the answers because all 10 people that I asked came back with a similar answer. And more than half of them came back with, it's about time you're starting your own thing. So you have allies in your corner that are going to help give you some direction. You just got to be willing to ask. And when you put yourself out there, you'll be amazed at how many people are willing to help you. But kind of goes back to the whole theme of the show of just getting started.
Yep. Absolutely. No, that's a great tip. I like that. Because that actually lead really naturally into, hey, I texted you. You gave me that feedback. Now I'd like to take you to lunch and show you what I came up with.
It's exactly
It
what
actually
happened to
would
me.
work really, really well.
That's how I went from 1 to 5 clients. Like, simple stuff. A lot of it, I think, people like get enamored by like the marketing things, or they have these courses about like rapid growth, go from 0 to 6 figures in 6 months.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't. That's not realistic. Like there's a lot more involved to do that, but the important thing is just getting started.
Awesome. I think we can leave it on that.
Awesome. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Thanks, guys, for joining. We'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah.